We're recording.
Good morning, everybody.
Anyway,
I know, I just used my phone to slip it down. All right, good morning, everyone. Happy December, happy holidays. Call to order the EDC's meeting of December 2nd. Thanks all for joining. First, we'll kick off, as we usually do, with a review of the draft minutes from November 4th that Sean had circulated. Everyone has had a chance to review.
move we approve them.
Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, I'm not opposed, but I wasn't there, so I can't vote on it.
Okay. So today we're going to kind of take a couple of angles. We're going to report out on our BR&E survey that Sean was kind enough to circulate a couple weeks back. An update on our working groups, and then kind of talk about where we want to spend our time, depending how much we have left on a strategic planning discussion. If there's not time, I'd like to try to set a dedicated time, either likely January, once the holidays are past, to kind of sit down and think through, how life is looking at the EDC and with the city, not quite fully post-COVID, but what the new normal looks like and what we've had on our plates this year. So I think that's today's lens. So I guess I'd give the BR&E working group members the floor and a chance to talk through survey results.
Great. Thanks, Phil. So I'll just do a quick recap. Hopefully you all have had an opportunity to at least see the survey results in your inbox. It's quite a few pages. The first 25 really have a lot of the data, and there is an executive summary on a one-pager on the first or second page. So, but just a reminder, we ran this in October. We had an 8% return, about 185 responses. A reminder that the last time we did this in 2017, it was literally two people, teams of two, going out, sitting face-to-face with businesses. This time it was digital. So we've definitely turned a corner there, and we're going to be able to build on, hopefully, the relationship we're initiating with businesses. And a reminder, we really are looking at this, the working group, as a starting point. Sometimes surveys are a report card and you put it on a shelf. This is really about engaging going forward. So there's some good data in there. There's quite a bit of similarities to the 2017 issues, which we noticed as a group. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, except there's just persistent issues that businesses are facing here in Portsmouth. But really what we want to do is engage them going forward. We've got a lot of the open comments that are going to be, we need to go through and analyze and look for patterns, kind of look for some critical mass on how the EDC can come alongside businesses and either provide support or advocacy, or maybe even potentially solutions if they present themselves. So that's kind of where we're at. A lot of the businesses have been in Portsmouth for a long time. A lot of the businesses that responded, you probably noticed it was smaller businesses that responded, which we sort of expected. So not a lot of surprises there, but I think based on the outreach and our goal and I'll talk a little bit more about that, our goal going forward, we really find this as a starting point to build relationships with all businesses of all sizes in Portsmouth. A couple things I did want to mention that there are, at the time, which was October, businesses were pretty confident that they were going to grow. They felt good about where they were financially and their ability to grow, improve their financial health over the next 2 years. That was a nice result. Not sure where that is today in December, but and we'll see what next year holds, right? But a few of them did talk about the uncertainty in the economy, so we're all going to navigate that together. And again, we want to be connected with our businesses that want to be engaged with us to help them address those issues. And I think, as we expected, the problems that are facing businesses, right? There were some challenges with permitting with the city, which we're going to dig into, but those primarily food and hospitality industry. So we'll just address that as we get more detail. But between economic uncertainty, the ability to hire employees, energy costs, and employee housing costs, they all came up, right? So we logged those. We knew we'd get those responses, and obviously a lot of folks in this room are working to address those issues as best we can. And now I think we're going to have kind of that second tier of issues to really partner with our businesses. So, any questions on the results? And I do want to just take a minute after that and then talk about what we've talked about as a working group going forward.
Are you looking for questions or observations? Do you want me to save my observation for later, or is now the time?
I think now's the day.
Okay. Yeah, I found it interesting that the longer that the businesses were in Portsmouth, sort of the less optimistic they seemed to be about growth and change in the city from a permitting perspective. So I would be interested in sort of the data underneath some of those observations. Like, has it really changed for the quote-unquote worse, or does it just feel that way? The second thing that I found interesting was it was very focused on building in Portsmouth, being in Portsmouth, hiring in Portsmouth, and are there opportunities to augment Portsmouth businesses with digital strategies for hiring, for expansion, for outreach? And I'm not sure I saw that from the results. Like, are they looking at more digital channels as far as for restaurants, having digital menus or digital servers, or are there things that we could do from a technology perspective to help support and grow businesses in new ways? So those were my two main takeaways from it.
Great. Thank you.
Counselor?
Yeah, thank you. Just to your first issue, I know that the council has been working with on looking at streamlining some of the permitting processes, as well as the codes, and making the documentation of the city fire codes and building codes more accessible, more readable. They're pretty dense the way they are.
Right.
And so I would hope that in part would alleviate some of those problems about permitting. Just a thought for that.
We had a working group a few years ago. It might be worth bringing those results back as far as some observations we got from developers and business owners around permitting improvements to see, did those hit the mark? Are there still opportunities there? So we could take some previous research and work that we did within the EDC to see how that might dovetail with the results here as well.
Sean, you mentioned the permitting was more tailored or more commentary from the hospitality space?
Yes, that's what the results we saw. But I think what we'll see is if that's a theme for any business doing business here, we'll want to address it. I will say I had a conversation with Shanti Wolf, and he is in the final stages of rewriting some of that code and making it more accessible. So hopefully, we may know something soon once it's presented to the council, and if it gets approved, then we'll be able to put our eyes on it and share that out with our new contacts.
Go, Tom, then the assistant mayor.
Well, I was just going to say, from my experience while I was still practicing law, it was typically not the developers who were concerned about the administrative red tape, if you will, associated with getting businesses open. Most of the time they have the attorneys and the staff to be able to handle that type of stuff. It was often particularly restaurateurs who were trying to get liquor licenses, and you got to go through the exercise with the state, and then the city adds an overlay on it that oftentimes business owners don't understand. If we're regulated with the state, why do we have to go through this exercise with the city? So I think the hospitality industry is probably really driving that. Other businesses don't have the same administrative hoops, if you will, that the hospitality field does.
I was just going to comment a little bit along the same lines as Tom, and I would wonder that when we talk about the inspections department in the hospitality world, are we talking about just the health? Are we talking about building, or are we talking about electrical and fire? So I would be interested to know in that realm, where they find the inspections more difficult, in what avenue.
Right, and I think that's where the comments are going to help us as we go through those 80 pages.
It's a lot.
That we do. Yeah. So it's good. It's data, right? So,
Sean?
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that as a city, we have gone through a change in the permitting process over the past, I don't know, I lose track now, but at least 5 years, maybe more, where we went to more digital online permitting, and I know there was a lot of chaos at that point, and there were a couple inspectors that cycled through, so I think there have been a lot of changes, and I think now things are starting to settle down a little bit, so I think it was just sort of normal, if you will, to have that chaos just because of the change. So hopefully, we're on the right track. Just anecdotally, from what I hear, I think we are.
Yeah, and I think, again, like we talked about very early on in this process, the ability to have these communications and to get that feedback and process it is really exactly where we want to be, at least as an EDC. And I'll just remind this group that the city is hiring a digital communications person to do that, which is an intent to open up lines of communication with citizens, and I would say businesses as well, really anybody. That's what the city council wants to be able to do more of. So I think there's a lot of groundwork, a lot of infrastructure being built around the ability to communicate and hopefully be responsive. So I think we're right in line with that.
Andy?
Going back to kind of piggybacking on Tom's comment on the restaurants, and it's especially painful for restaurants that want to transition real estate and business to a new restaurateur, and even if they want to continue the brand, continue the name, continue the staff, continue everything, they can't do that transaction on a Friday and then open on Monday. It's impossible. And the loss of goodwill and the loss of regulars coming in on a, let's say a 3-month shutdown while improvements are being made and the restaurants being up to code is devastating to the numbers. Whereas if they can have an easy transition through, so one of the solutions to that is somehow coming up with a plan to do those required improvements over a set period of time, and kind of making a plan with the health department to do that over 6 months or 12 months while the restaurant's functioning. I think the other reason why it came up in the report is that's the new businesses coming to Portsmouth are restaurants. Yeah. So it's going to get highlighted in the report.
I'll jump in. I just had one thing that struck me in the executive summary. In the employee section, it seems like they're describing the available pool of employees in the surrounding area as very good or good, but then we also have the issue where there's not enough staffing or not enough ability to hire employees. So was that from different business sectors? I need to spend some more time reviewing it, but I wonder if...
Yeah, I think at one point we asked the Survey Center if we could, if there was a kind of a cut by industry, and I don't think there was. So I think we're going to have to go through the data and just see. I mean, we know, we hear anecdotally, right? But I will just say my experience is there's just this labor shortage that's going to be there, but there are companies that are figuring it out. Yeah. So, and there's lots of things. I think workforce is continuing to bubble up as a primary issue. Because it's going to get in the way of growth, and that's something we don't want to have happen. So how do we help employers? How do we understand, and then is there a way for us to help with those issues? I think is the opportunity.
Yeah, they do break it out. The question 14 on the confidence of being able to hire, they do break it out by industry. And accommodations and food services is the lowest of that. It was 30 versus similar to 50 to 70 for all the other industry segments. So it was significantly lower there. So there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I know we've sort of, it's natural to go to the problem areas and want to dissect those and dive into that, and we certainly should, but there's a lot of good confidence in the business community that comes across in this report. So I just hope everyone sees that and acknowledges that there's a lot to be excited about, and people are talking about expansion, they're talking about hiring, they're talking and being able to hire. So,
wanting to be here in Portsmouth.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here that we should be proud of as a community. Exciting stuff looking forward.
So going forward, thank you for teeing that up.
Yeah.
So what we've talked about as a working group is, so we've responded to folks who wanted the email, and what I sent them was the first 25 pages and said, it's all available. If you want the other 80 pages, just email me. I just didn't assume they wanted all of that, but the transparency issue is there. It's going to be public information. It's going to be on the website. People will be able to get to it. But we did respond to the folks who asked for it and gave us their email. There are folks who asked for a meeting. I'm going to send a separate email on that and start to try to get those scheduled. We talked as a group about creating a drip campaign. Alan, is that what we call it? For all you marketers, right? And just using the data and getting into this cadence of communicating with with folks who want to be communicated with and posting things to engage in businesses around Portsmouth. Whether it's a monthly and we're pulling things out of, maybe some good stuff out of the survey, maybe some challenges, and talk about how we hear you and we're trying to address them. But this drip campaign just makes a lot of sense because it goes back to, again, why are we doing this? We want to increase the engagement. We talked about maybe some potential. Maybe a separate digital newsletter. We'll see when we get a new digital communications person, and maybe some mini engagement campaigns. We may have one of the things we're looking at is a CRM, a customer relationship management tool that was built specifically for economic development organizations. I think I mentioned that at the last meeting. That would give us the ability to communicate much more easily and potentially even do interim or targeted or our own annual surveys without having to, I'll say, pay an outside vendor, but we'll see how that goes. Here's kind of what I shared, what we kind of landed on. Our 12-month vision is to have robust engagement tools to have an accurate and active customer list, my language, right? And then have the ability to launch these interim targets and interim communications so that we're not doing this once a year. We're not trying to catch up. We're not running a survey every 5 years. We're just in this active dialogue with our businesses. That's the vision. Did I miss anything, Alan? Or
No, I don't think so. And I think we talked a little bit about looking at who the respondents were and what industries they're from and that sort of thing, and trying to see if there are maybe some gaps there that we could fill or pay attention to a little more the next time around. Maybe we might have missed some larger companies because, the email goes to someone who's not even there anymore. Who knows?
Right, so that could be an opportunity for us to determine how do we want to engage larger industries.
Yeah.
Right, and that may be a different approach.
I would hope that CRM would be a self-scrubbing database, so that we're not getting bounce-back emails. I don't know if we got the feedback on how many bounce-backs we got.
Yeah.
The Secretary of State information, you file, and you have to file annually typically, but you're not looking at email addresses all the time when you're filing.
Right.
Yeah. It's going to take some work, and
Yeah.
I'm already thinking about, getting some help over the summer.
Sean, right, if you do it by registration email, a lot of times it's council, right?
Right.
For
Yeah.
the
Larger
entity,
companies.
so they're not going to respond.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Intern was the word I was looking for.
Well, and I think your point, Andy, is a good one. This came up at the Chamber Collaborative meeting where Sean kind of presented this. I think the 8% response rate is probably understated based on the number of emails this went out to, and
Right.
the actual businesses that are more than a sole proprietor.
Right.
So I just think that's worth noting. This is probably a better sample size than it might look at first glance.
Yeah.
One more thing. I think this was all pre-pandemic, but we had started a conversation around new ways of working, co-working spaces, digital support, downtown Wi-Fi. Have we gotten any outreach from Cove or any of the other co-working spaces to see what kinds of businesses or industries are leveraging their shared spaces? And maybe that's another opportunity for outreach. If we look at the size of the businesses, a lot of them aren't going to be able to stand up their own infrastructure, but still need meeting space, and maybe there's some insight we could get from those spaces. I noticed Port Walk, I think there's another co-working space
A
over
new
there
one,
as well.
right?
Yep, that is brand new, and it's interesting to, anecdotally, I'll share that there's and I don't know how commonplace this is, but I know HubSpot recently gave up their office space and has taken a few offices in that new Port Walk co-working space because they are mostly working remotely, so they just need a place to get together every now and then and do their brainstorming together, and occasionally if they don't want to work from home, so they have that option. So I don't know if that's becoming more and more commonplace, but when HubSpot made that decision, it certainly opened my eyes to, okay, that's happening. I just don't know how frequently.
Yeah, I think that's happening in the market. Andy, I'm sure you see it. Because there's just not many office tenants out there, and you have a lot of office space.
So my reaction is, I think there's an opportunity to say, what is that transformation look like in Portsmouth, and is there something we as EDC can do to support it, to come alongside, to advocate, to understand it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. Tom?
I think there's an opportunity as well to do something that would sort of highlight what this commission does with the public. So I think instead of just focusing solely on our communications with the business community, if we could, do something like a press release that would go to the general public, be available on the city's website or whatever, or break it maybe even into 2 or 3 pieces that would say, this is the health of the health and the issues of the business community in Portsmouth. I like Ben's thought about all the positive things that this report may say, and so I don't know if we could work with somebody from the Herald or just do it on our own, but I treat it like a census report. You know how the people will drill down in census report and say, this is what it's telling you about this community or that business sector, that type of thing. I think that would be helpful for the general public, but I think it would also let people know what we do as a public commission.
That's a great point.
Great.
Yeah. I like that idea a lot. It makes me think of the great Colliers information that goes out periodically with kind of updates on the real estate market that we get for work. Something along those lines, maybe quarterly, with kind of what we're up to. I mean, this is a perfect example in the first instance that lends itself to
Yeah, and that's what we hear, right? Businesses still want to come or be in Portsmouth or expand. So maybe everyone doesn't know that. I mean, we know people want to live here. I mean, so there's just, the demand is there on both sides.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a nice point to underscore coming out of the pandemic, right? I think there was a lot of, at various points over the course of the last 36 months, just with uncertainty and how our downtown would or wouldn't be occupied. So kind of a nice inflection point.
Great.
We could do it as a drip, too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Quarterly drip.
And I'm sure Stephanie could help us with that, the press release and the news stories. We wouldn't have to sort that out on our own.
Great.
I would like to also suggest that this get presented to the council at some point when you've sifted the data a little more, maybe. And I know we've all looked at it from a high level, but I think it would be important for the council to have a presentation of this at some point too.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you. Everett?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up, but I was with a pretty major developer in the state yesterday, and he said, respective to question 1 in Massachusetts, which passed 3 weeks ago, whatever, that he said that the state of New Hampshire had received 500 phone calls in 2 weeks from Massachusetts businesses that wanted to relocate in New Hampshire. And right, and question 1 is that the millionaire tax.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I suspect, given who this individual was, he had a pretty direct line to the governor's office, and so, and his development was going to be taking advantage of that. So, we as Portsmouth probably. I'm curious, Sean, have we received calls? Have we had about relocation of business out of Mass?
I have not.
Have not yet. Okay. Interesting to know, what the state's office says about that. This was his proclamation, so it was pretty telling, and given what happened in Mass, you could totally see that
Yeah.
taking place.
And I'll say, but even before that issue came up, there are companies looking to relocate from us. That's what I'm hearing on the street. We're hearing that from Pease, I think. That demand is already there for people to move, for
Yeah.
companies to move up here. So this just adds
Yeah, right. And,
urgency to it.
Given, back to the office question, I think I read recently, only 45% of office space is actually occupied, not leased, but occupied today. So we know Pease is, subject to that, and, there must be a huge opportunity out of Pease to take advantage of some of that, if in fact this actually takes place. You think they would be the prime beneficiary, right?
Yeah. No, it's definitely something we're watching closely, obviously. And
Yeah, we still have the issues of we need employees and we
Right.
need places for them to
Well,
live.
my
And
guess
you
is they
can-
would, if you're at Pease, you'd bring your employees with you, right? They'd probably,
Yeah.
largely.
Sure. Yep. Opportunities there.
Understood, right?
The opportunity's there.
Do we have, Sean, on our website, a relocation page, talks about, who to contact, what, where? I mean, not
I mean,
the
there's some
things that-
general information, that is on my to-do list. It needs to be updated and more dynamic, and I'm excited about a new digital person coming in to help me with that. I'll be leaning heavily on some of those new skills, but yes. I mean, if there's some general information.
I could fax
It
it to
could-
them if they want to come to New Hampshire. I can fax some stuff because that's about the level of my technology expertise.
I'm not even sure. Yeah.
We still can't read any emails
Wow.
you send ever because they're all encrypted.
I know it, right?
Assume if it's important, you send it
I
twice.
know it, right?
Login, two-factor authentication. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, I'll
Right.
just ask him about whatever's in there.
Right. I'll ask him what his Wordle word was when I see it.
Thanks for sharing that, Everett. That's great. Any other questions or thoughts on BRE? One question I have, in terms of, it feels like this is going to be ongoing work still. So I think maybe, just a question on whether the work of that working group expands or if it stays pretty narrow. I mean, I think there's more of an outreach. Just kind
I'll
of changes
defer-
gears now that the
I'll
survey's-
defer to the working group. Yeah, I think, well, go ahead.
What do you think?
I don't know, maybe one or more of us would swap out or something, or if somebody's interested, sure, we can always need more. I don't know that we need more people in the subcommittee necessarily, but certainly.
I think I'm
You're always
thinking more
welcome.
like, is it going to be more outwardly focused? We're talking retention and expansion, like kind of outreach, coordinating. I mean, that
Yeah,
guess falls in.
I think it folds up into the strategic conversation. Like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Now we have some data, we have some thoughts, we have some ideas. There's work to do.
I think it'll sort of morph into whatever it is over time, and that'll probably change every year, depending on what we get for feedback and what companies we hear from and everything else. And I think we'll discover something new every time.
Okay, good. So the next we've got on here is our land use update. We've got the assistant mayor. Any
Yes.
updates you want to share?
So recently, I was not at the meeting, I was in Africa, but the Land Use Committee submitted for City Council approval to go to the Planning Board a revised ADU. Our thought process is we would like to be able to streamline the application process to have certain parameters that it would just be administrative approval. You would not have to go in front of the boards. There's a little bit of division on the thought. I think a lot of the Land Use Committee views ADUs as more generational housing versus affordable housing. We know that it can cost anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000. So it's really not a replacement for any type of workforce or affordable housing, but it really can streamline and really is a good substitute for generational housing. So having either your children there or your parents there and or both. So that did pass. So that will be going over to the planning board. So that is that phase. We will be starting our affordable housing segment of it, starting, I think, in January. As our city planner is retiring, and we have just promoted, was it
Peter Britt.
Peter Britz up, and so he will be heading up that. So we have suspended our meeting for this month, and we'll resume next month when he is becomes more acclimated to the position.
Great. Okay. I did want to also share that Bob Marhefka will be joining and replacing Sarah in her role on the Land Use Committee, so
Big shoes to fill.
Bob will be jumping in January when work resumes. And I also wanted to, just in the fact that the ADU has been referred to the planning board, I thought that probably would be something that this group would be, I think, some indication of our support for increase of housing stock would be worth discussion today. I know we haven't circulated the actual language of the proposed amendments to the zoning out to this group, and we can certainly do that, but I thought it would be at least worth, if this group feels that's something we want to support, and I think increase the housing stock and mitigating increases to housing costs in light of all the BRE stuff would be something that we could kick around today, and if we were so inclined, after reviewing the ADU language that's up for consideration either at planning board or before it gets referred back to the council for a vote, something we can talk about maybe to lend our support. Any thoughts or comments from folks on that? Tom?
Just, I mean, this is a real, I hate to use the term can of worms, but it's a real opportunity to sort of get lost in a rabbit hole on these type of issues. So I think this would be an area, a topic area for us to weigh in on. And the question I would have is, how far down do we want to drill? Because watching some of the city council meetings on this and reading the piece that was in the paper last week, so this land use committee has put a lot of time into the ADU, but the focus seems to has been on as much sort of protecting the character of the neighborhoods in which the ADUs are going to be built as it is, let's increase the number of units of housing in a city. So, for instance, the provision that says that the ADU has to be architecturally compatible with the main structure. I'm not so sure why that is the case, particularly since you get neighborhoods in which you get houses from many different architectural styles and periods of time. But is that something that we want to get down to that level? Do we want to say, where we think the biggest issue is having affordable housing, having more housing, and all these extra things are impediments to that? Or do we want to simply say we want you to, make ADUs easier, period? And so that's a debate I don't have the answer to right now, but I think that's the level we have to get to if we're going to weigh in on it. And sort of related to that, because Joanna has just reminded us that that committee is going to go into affordable housing generally. I think that's going to run into an issue we briefly touched on 2 or 3 months ago, which is will the answer to affordable housing mean allowing more of it in industrial zones and other areas that currently, are experiencing shortage of space as well? So we're going to run into the conflict between the growth of certain segments of the economy with the need for more housing. And that's another issue that we probably should spend some time talking about before we jump on the bandwagon, but we'll have to do it pretty soon.
Yeah. Comments, Alan?
If I could, it's a little bit tangential, but certainly related. I read, it may have even been in that same article, but I'm not sure, and I'm certainly no expert. But I read something about there being a lack of enabling legislation from the state that allows a mandate for affordable housing as part of a project. So I'm wondering how other towns, I mean, we hear about Dover all the time, and other cities and towns in the state mandating larger percentages around that. How do they get around that? Does anyone know? And is that something we can adopt? Or is that just simply the way we do it?
It's only through density bonuses that they
I
that's
see.
the only tool that exists through the state right now is density bonuses. So you can incentivize it, but you cannot require it.
I see.
Is the broad strokes of how that works. Am I correct, David? Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with the Stratford County Courthouse.
Right.
There. Chinbury was able to save it because he was able to get enough additional units in the backside of the building and a new structure to justify keeping a certain percentage of them affordable. But you're absolutely right. The problem New Hampshire has is there's no 40B enabling legislation that would mandate. So I know that there's some talk about working with our local delegation to try to see where that goes, but, you know, New Hampshire is such a home rule state,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that
Yeah.
will apply.
There is, I believe, at least one piece of legislation that was submitted prior to the session opening that is bringing a bill to bring that forward again. I believe, from my recollection, that bills have been brought back almost every single session to try to push it through, and a lot of them just get expedited to kill. But that is a problem, and it's a constant problem, especially, I think, not especially, but on the council side, it's something that we always, have to go back to is, of course, we would require mandated, affordable, and workforce units in every development if we could, but we can't. And so it's a hard line that we end up having to draw on, as all of us here explain to the public continuously. Like, we would if we could, we can't. Part of it is, I know the mayor and the mayor's roundtables are meeting again. The legislative subcommittee did meet with our local delegation, and again, we are pushing it. There has been small conversation about going to the mayor, myself, and some other people going to other communities through the housing coalition and really pitching it out to them. I think you have this division in our state, and sometimes it's beaten across the table saying that just because we have this legislation doesn't mean that you have to do it in your municipality, but we would like to do it in ours. To touch on one of the things, if you don't mind, that Tom said about the character-based, the goal of that is not for everywhere in the community. It's because if we go through the administrative approvals, we really wanted to do something to make sure, like the HDC and the planning board and the zoning board were going to be comfortable that if something happened in the historic district, that it was going to fit the historic district. My personal opinion is I think that article was a little one-sided. There was no there was no questioning of anyone on the land use board, which is why there was no comments in that. So I think it was very much one counselor's opinion presented in that article, which I think is a shame because it has been around 9 to 10 months of really intense work that's gone into with the land use committee, with the city staff, with our outside resources that went into really kind of honing down that. But again, the goal of that part of the process is to get it so it's administratively approved. So we have, a dozen or so requirements, and if you meet those, then you're good. You don't have to. We were finding that people were spending $20,000, $30,000 just on legal upfront costs. And so we were set, our big goal, and we did a big survey. We had small working groups with people who had built ADUs, applied for ADUs, architects, engineers, attorneys that had represented clients. And the overreaching analysis was that the initial cost of ADUs was so prohibitive. And very subjective to, as we know, these boards go back and forth, and very subjective to what people wanted in certain communities and in certain neighborhoods. And so the goal, again, was to bring it back to just a very, as we talk about streamlining a lot of inspections and a lot of things within our city government, is bringing it back to, okay, if the chief planning, the city planner says yes, if the If staff can say yes, then we can get that going.
Sarah?
So one quick, I think back to what Commissioner Mahefka had shared when we were at the high school around taking positions around specific parcel development and Commissioner Watson's feedback on at what cost or what's our position. I think it would behoove us to develop some strong shared positions on the areas that have economic impact in the city. Like we are advocates for affordable housing or workforce housing in these conditions, and in making it as easy as possible versus getting into the details of the supporting a specific piece of work that's going through a particular board. I feel like we may be lacking some of those grounding principles that we can draw from when we decide what we take a position on and what we do not.
I think we've kind of always had, a general policy, but nothing in writing on. So I think my thought on this wouldn't be specific to. It would be more an indication of support for increase in housing stock to mitigate costs, not for specific parameters within the zoning amendment, so that it would be applicable whether it's in this case or others. But to your point, I mean, it could be in conflict sometimes if we feel like we don't want to be cannibalizing industrial zones or working against the zoning ordinance. So I think
it could be part of everything seems to come back to the strategic development. It could be this is what we focus on as our strategy, so that this is what we choose to invest time and this is where we focus. So if we can draw from that, bring it back to our goals and our principles, it'll make it easier to have these conversations.
yeah, that's great. Everett?
Phil, Sean, is there, have we investigated the state or the governor's, do you have $20 million? Or what was the number that he was setting aside for affordable housing?
Invest NH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't. I know that.
The city has.
What's that?
The city has. The city received significant funding, both for to hire a position that's a housing advocate or housing navigator.
navigator.
Thank
Yep.
you, navigator, and also some money for some zoning review and by an outside consultant. So the city staff did a great job of tapping into some of that money. Where Portsmouth, unfortunately, the big pool of that money was for $10,000 a unit to incentivize some housing that would be at affordable rates. That had to be shovel-ready projects, and I don't think there was anything that fit the right timing in Portsmouth, so we missed that pool of money, which was unfortunate, but some local communities did, which I think will benefit the region as a whole. I think Exeter, Epping,
yep.
both received some funding in that regard.
I would, and I've brought this up since 2020, when the city received, was it $12 or $20 million? And it was it AFCA, and I don't know, sorry about the acronym, from the federal government. Yeah. And it was and I know the city manager said we've used some of it over time, but there's a pool of money there. And I was just of the impression that this would be a great place for us to seed, a major workforce housing project somewhere in the city. And I know other people have other feelings about it, but if you really want to have a legacy kind of impact on the city, and given that that's been one of our primary objectives at the EDC, it's part of our mission, then my view would be we should be advocating for that.
Councilor Lombardi, and then
I had coffee with Craig Walsh a little while ago, and we talked about this whole thing. And yes, he basically missed the opportunity for that because he didn't have he's just finished this one project, and he's looking at his next one. Unfortunately, everything moves too slowly to have him get in on that for this year, but he's looking forward to next year as a
if any of those funds might still be available.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I think, and I know, Sean, right, there's a window of time we have to use it. I think there's still a couple of years, but I forget all the details. I don't know if
But I guess the question that I would have is, and again, I don't recall the details, you probably both would much better than I seem to recall the city manager going through the asks for that money versus the pool left, and it was something in the order of 5 million or 6 million left.
Yes.
17 million in requests.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I've been 100% agreement that, these are the kinds of things that we ought to be investing in, but I'm wondering, practically speaking, whether that is even a potential, which seems like a missed opportunity, but, there's so many requests.
Well, I guess I would respond to that as saying that, if this is a priority of the EDC, it would be good for the EDC to make a statement to the city council.
And the planning board.
Mayor.
To touch on what you said, I think that this housing navigator that we were granted the position over, I think, 2 years.
2 years.
Will really help set up fundamentally, the course that we need to take. Also, I just lost it. Just left.
Yeah, well, go ahead,
Sorry,
please.
just came back.
I wanted to do that.
If the committee would like, we do have a housing policy set in place in 2017. We are looking to, revitalize that. It basically says, it was from spearheaded by Senator Koka, then Councillor Koka, that says that it's really a policy geared towards the approval boards that says that if a project leads with affordability, to give it some mercy on some of the other things. So we're looking to kind of get that back out there to the zoning board, to the planning board, and I, between Sean and myself, can share it with this committee, because that may fall more in line, as you said, Commissioner LaChance, with the what we get behind. And I constantly bring that up when we're talking about projects and emailing back and forth with the planning board, because it's kind of like a forgotten city policy that if somebody is leading with affordability, they to look at some of the CUPs and variances a little bit differently.
Would be interested in seeing that. Yeah.
We know that Portsmouth Housing is moving forward with their next project. The deadline was yesterday for submissions for concepts, and he's looking at August, the tax credit deadline, but that project's also going to need zoning relief.
It's going to need some what?
It'll need changes to zoning for it to go forward.
Tell us where that is, or is that not public yet?
I don't know, is it public?
I don't know.
I don't know if it's public.
I don't know if it's hidden, but I don't know if it's public.
Right.
I don't know. Ask me after the meeting. It's obviously, JSA submitted, so.
I would say this, that in my conversation with Craig, he's very interested in the Sherburne School.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's been out in the public realm. That seems to
The
be,
Lister Academy
as Lister Academy is going to move to community campus,
Yeah.
Right.
which those plans are going up for
Yeah.
approval.
And I think one of the guesses on zoning is that it could move to be a gateway district, a G1
Yeah.
or G2, because it's not proper right now. And that would need to be
And if I wasn't
Streamlined.
supposed to say that, I didn't
No,
say
I
it.
feel like that's
I
been
just
pretty.
didn't want it to come from my mouth, so thank you.
Wasn't coming from mine.
And if anybody's watching this later on and there's this blank thing in the don't worry about it.
Kevin, it gets a little
The
fuzzy.
18-second gap.
The Nixon tapes.
Yes.
No,
The reach.
and just to close the loop on, I think someone made one of the comments about ability for the city to require affordability within projects. I think that's one thing that the land use committee will be looking at is incentives. So I think, it's time to revisit what exists in zoning now, and maybe that's the lens that newer projects get evaluated through if there's changes there. So that might frame some of the discussions and where we can be active in advocating or not advocating, and without being conflicting with zoning. That's revised, so, okay.
So just as closure, we have an action plan, or are we going to wait and see what happens next?
So I think if the assistant mayor could circulate the housing policy, I think not asking for, I think maybe we can save some of the airtime for the strategic planning discussion. I think there's certainly enough there to, my suggestion would be to focus our January meeting on that topic. We could take up this particular item as part of that. I don't think that the council will be hearing any first or second reading of any changes to zoning prior to then, so I think we should all have a robust discussion around the topic because it has implications for the ADU, but also many others that we're likely to see in the year ahead. So we'd rather not be get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, and I don't have a specific proposal, but it seems to me we might want to be involved earlier in that process of creating the new laws than to wait till it gets to the council stage and then say, we have concerns about it. So just being a little more proactive at this stage.
Yep. And I think that would be my thought with representation on the land use committee as they're looking at that. They'll keep us apprised, and I think we've got great EDC representation and perspective from both of you on where we are. So as those discussions evolve, and I think there's going to be opportunities for public input. I think that's already happened on the ADU piece, so certainly we're kind of late to the game on that, but as we're going through the public input process, bringing that back to us. But I think that strategic conversation in January will help tee that up, and maybe we can do a good job of setting that in place so when these topics come up, they'll be prepared to give our perspective. Okay. Excellent. So do either of the counselors have updates outside of what we've already touched upon to share with us today? That would be...
Yeah, I have a few. One of the things that the council has been working on is the Islington Creek neighborhood parking program. It's interesting, we had a work session on that. It was pretty robust commentation. I don't know where that's going myself. My major concern, my personal major concern, is that it doesn't become something that is divisive. And because there's people who are all for it and there's people who are not. And maybe the assistant mayor can have a different view of that. But the other thing that's been, we talked about the code review and stuff like that. There's a proposal to create the Bohenko Park as a sculpture park. That was brought up by the Portsmouth 400 committee, and that was reviewed very positively. We did settle the Deer Street lawsuit as well, and that was pretty important to do.
Sorry, just to expand on the Deer Street, within that settlement agreement, the city's getting $165,000 to develop Lot 2, which is, if you've walked by there recently, that pretty awful lot that sits between the parking lot and Eastern Bank, and so that will be a park. That will be public space. So part of our settlement money comes back, and that will turn into green space, public use park.
It's not the whole lot.
It's Lot 2, yeah.
Lot 2.
Entire, from the street to the...
Yep, the whole Lot 2.
That's pretty good.
Assistant Minister, is that more than just what was the laydown area? Because way back when we cited the parking garage, there was going to be a laydown area between the hotel and the garage.
Right.
And that was going to be
Right.
public area, and we'd have sculptures
Yeah.
and what have you. So is that considered Lot 2, or is it?
That is
it-
Lot 2, yeah.
Yeah,
That is,
yes.
okay.
So there's still a liner
Hotel
building.
lot.
Well, from my understanding from the last set of plans that were submitted, because Deer Street King has now sold several of those lots. So the development plans have changed. The hotel that will be on, if you are looking on it onto the left, will still be there, and then lot 2, cuts across like this.
So I think maybe that parcel includes Eastern Bank, that building.
Yes.
So there was originally a liner building proposed.
Yes.
That the lot 2 sits between the parking garage and that building.
Correct.
That still will be developed at some point, it sounds like.
Yes.
Or could be.
Could be.
So we're not getting more land than we originally thought as part of
No,
the settlement.
no.
It's getting apart.
We're just getting a park and the funding for that.
That's,
Great.
The other thing is that we removed all but one taxi parking spaces from downtown. So, there's only one Medallion left in town.
Sounds like a business opportunity.
Yeah. So we thought that it was ridiculous to have all these taxi parking spaces.
We had, I think,
noticed
6. We had,
Yeah, 6.
we had
It's only-
6.
6 in one car.
Yeah.
Oh,
We had 6.
thank you.
And so we add,
So we added some more parking spaces, metered parking spaces.
Were they,
It was good.
are they short-term, or what, how were they returned to inventory?
they were
They're in this, I'm not sure how they are.
So there were 3 on Market Street. So
Yeah.
so I actually spurred this because as with outdoor dining, there was a little obviously downtown commotion, and so I went to my neighbors and said, "Hey, if I could get you a spot in front of your spot year round, not just would you be happy with that?" And so I went around and marked where all of the taxi stands were, and out and about saw that they just weren't used. So brought that back to Park and Traffic and Safety. Through conversations, found that there was only one active medallion. I think at the height there were like 10 active medallions, and so it made sense to have 6 or 7 spots. So there's only one left, and it's at the corner of Bow and Market, kind of right outside where Native Sun, the old Fat Bellies is. We regained 2 spots. They're full normal spots, not 15 minutes, in front of essentially the gas light. So right in front of that, and then in front of G. Willikers. Then there were 2 in front of the new Toscana, and then I believe 1 more down on Congress that we got back.
Prime parking.
Yeah, prime parking. That just you can use. And obviously, we know for the last, I think, 6 or 8 months, loading zones were monitored, and now those between 3 and 5 p.m. now turn into regular parking spots too. So it's the higher use ones. So I think it's Market directly in front of my business stays a loading zone until I think 5 p.m. But the ones in front of Kilwins and things become regular parking after, I believe, 3 p.m. So really trying to up available spots, especially in light of Hanover's.
That's from Moxie.
Yep, and cross of Moxie now too. That becomes regular parking. So we just know parking is always
Yeah.
a sightline issue.
What else? We had a special meeting on the Little Bay water pipe. This is a kind of very important project for Portsmouth. This is a new pipe, a 24-inch pipe going across Little Bay from the Bellamy Reservoir right to Portsmouth. 70% of our water comes from the Bellamy. So it's and there are the 2 existing pipes are 60+ years old. We had pictures of them. They're all pitted, and it would be a total disaster if we lost them in any way. So this new pipe is very important. We've been negotiating with the owners of the property. It's private property. And it hasn't, the negotiations have not yet been fruitful, but the owners came to the meeting. They seemed to be very amenable. They had concerns about what they viewed as a lack of communication, what the city viewed as changing engineering issues. So it's a project that's in process. The changing engineering, they just created different conversations over time. The council really stressed that we would rather see a negotiated sale of the right-of-way rather than a eminent domain process. Just eminent domain is just an ugly thing to do. So I hope I'm hoping that we get kind of frequent updates on where that is, so that we can keep it a negotiated process.
May I ask, the reported drama around the eminent domain issue, has that been overblown in our press, or is that a real thing?
It didn't seem like a lot of drama. It just, I mean, we had conversations with these people who own the property, and they seem very amenable to working with us. They were just frustrated in that the details kept changing because of the engineering. And so,
Is there currently, just curious, is there currently a pipe on the property that?
yes, there are two pipes.
Yeah, so looking to kind
Yeah.
of codify that, solidify that, and
Yeah,
formally.
so, and this would be a third pipe, and one of the problems is that those pipes are so old and the valves are so old, they don't dare turn them off or move them, just because if it broke, it would be a disaster. What the plan is to put the new pipe in, then cap off those pipes, do whatever that needs to be done to them, maybe run a liner through them, and then reopen them. So,
I think to expand on that, I think that's a very important part of it, is that there's a lot of concern about the integrity of the current pipes. There's been a lot of, not a lot, but a little bit of community feedback is, why don't we just run through those pipes, and why don't we, try to salvage them? But it seems, based on the engineering reports, that they are just not salvageable, and generally concerned that if we do anything to them, that it
Could be compromised.
it could be compromised. And through DPW, and there's a big desire to expand our ownership of the reserve area, because there is concern that developments could happen within a few miles of it, and how that could affect the reservoir. So I think the city's goal is to purchase more of continuously purchasing more of that land to make sure that our water supply stays safe.
right, this is just an easement across this property. If this property has been in this family for centuries. It's that old. So I don't think they're willing to give it up. But other properties, we've recently bought another tract of land around the reservoir to protect the watershed. So it's important. We did vote unanimously to authorize the eminent domain, because it's the council's. We have to, whether we want a negotiation, but we need the pipe. So it's stuff like that. I guess, there's a proposal to make State Street two-way, and this is something that I think that the EDC could think about, and maybe give the council some feedback on. This is one of those things that it would basically take the traffic off the bridge and take it up State, inbound, take it up to State Street rather than Congress Street, or Daniel Street and Congress Street. And it was, that kind of change, everyone has an opinion. And so I'd like to know what the business community really thinks of that idea. The opportunity for reducing traffic flow up through Market Square and Congress Street would give us the opportunity maybe to change the ratio of street to sidewalk through that area. And maybe the advantage of that, of course, would be maybe getting rid of the Jersey barriers for outdoor dining and all that stuff. So it's an interesting question. I don't know which way it'll go. So.
Could I just ask, what's the timing on that? And-
It was just a
Very
proposal
preliminary.
to study it.
So there's no study yet?
There are studies from, I believe, 2017 and maybe 2019,
Yeah.
don't quote me, but I know there's, I think, a 2017 one. And so it's just looking at that data again. So starting with like work sessions and very broad conversations. And I think this was brought up by Councilor Moreau. And it's really also looking at Market Square will be renovated in the next few years. So looking at what do we want to do there? Do we want to expand sidewalks? I know a huge point of conversation is the junction of Pleasant and Daniel, where Daniel turns to Congress and Market, and how it's just, if you're not familiar with the area, it just feels very unsafe. I sit out there more so, I think, than almost anyone besides Ann, and watch the flow of traffic there, and it's pretty horrible. So as we go through and start the process of looking at the Market Square master plan, is really looking, again, bird's eye view of the scape for downtown.
But the last thing I just want to bring up is, and we just received our council packet for Monday, and in it is a report on the outdoor dining. I haven't read it yet. I saw it was there, so.
Is that the survey that you sent us?
As I say, I haven't read it yet, so I think
Because I responded
maybe
to it.
Sean knows that.
No, it's the planning department.
Planning Department
Planning Department.
was requested to
Beverly.
provide a
Yeah,
support.
they had
report.
a whole committee of staff that worked through the
Yeah.
process. So it's their report
Yeah,
back
that's
and
right.
what will be
Yeah, staff
recommendations
report.
going forward.
But as I say, it just came to the council, came to my attention, but that, I think, should be informative to this committee as well.
Right.
Okay, we've got Ann,
Anything else?
Andy, and then Tom. Go on.
Just on the two-way State Street, I saw a presentation by the city planner for City of Dover on the work that they did looking at their Main Street. I can't remember the name of the Main Street in Dover, but it's a
Central Ave.
Central Ave. It's a racetrack. And we saw he presented the whole process they went through, and they have decided to change to two-way, but they're waiting to 2024 because they too have a 400th birthday, and they don't want to rattle the cages of anybody coming back into town and being confused. But it was interesting hearing why it went to one-way and then what they've done to study it to get to yes on two-way.
Okay, Andy?
Again, on the State Street, for this group in this room, there's plenty of resources and case studies out there for one-way streets going to two-way. So if you're looking for weekend reading, there's a ton of information out there. It's been going on, since we were building streets for bicycles only. And just an encouragement to the counselors that are there with this item on State Street. And a lot of other items where I've attended council meetings, a lot of times both the board and the community, or the council and the community, treats the issue as if we're the first city in the whole country to ever deal with it. And I've stood up and said that.
You say that a lot.
I did a lot of work on the skateboard ordinance 10 years ago, and we had a change, and I think we've had another change since then. And the bike lane on Middle Street is a really good example of, just go to Montreal. There's tons of places that have spent so much time on these issues. But I'm really excited to see, how the State Street study goes, but there's a lot of like great. If you're into urban planning, there's a lot of great information out there.
Google it, there's tons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
A lot of case studies.
I just have one more thing, too. Just that the Arts and Nonprofits Committee is forming a subcommittee to replace, to look at the cultural plan. Cultural plan was last done in 2012,
Bless you.
I think. And it's needing updating. It was done by ArtSpeak, if anyone recalls ArtSpeak, which is now
For 7 years.
defunct. So we don't have an art review committee at this time. And so that's part of the cultural plan, is to create an art review group for the city, for public art.
My hope is that it makes murals easier, so we can add some vibrancy. And you speak on Montreal.
Sculpture.
I love walking around Montreal in the Latin Quarter and just, mural after mural after mural, and it's beautiful.
Tom, did you want to circle back?
I don't want to belabor this, but I think this whole State Street thing is an issue that could impact on the business community, so I would ask maybe that Sean get copies of those 2017 and 19 reports, and we put that on the meeting in January for strategic planning.
As it relates to that, there was the city was studying whether or not they were to make Fleet Street, to expand the sidewalks, decide if that was going to be one-way or two-way. Is that, Sean, do we know, or do the city councilors know where that's gone? I think it was last summer we were talking about that.
Well, I don't know exact status of it. It was actually the first time that the city used the QR codes too. So they are expanding the sidewalks there. I believe it is going to stay a two-way, but
It is a state two-way, okay.
the sidewalks are going to get slightly
So
expanded.
they're going to reduce, so they're going to eliminate some parking spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can get a full update from Peter Rice and report back for the next meeting on
Yeah,
that.
because I thought the impetus behind that was when you come in from Maplewood and try to get into the parking garage.
It's really
that it went
difficult.
back up, and they wanted to go one way there.
Yeah.
So, and that's a disaster right now with that. Or
With
the
that
bump
block,
out
yeah.
with the for the Oyster House. Or
Yeah.
So that's going to continue to be two-way there.
Don't quote me on that. I'll get the report back from
I'll
Peter.
get
You know, whatever it is, it's happening in 2024.
24, yeah.
There's like
There's a
Dover,
gap
they're
year.
skipping the 23 year because they don't want construction
Yeah.
during festivities.
Well, and those people that are 400 who are coming back for their anniversary, they're not going to know the city. And it's going to be really challenging for them.
Yeah.
That's true.
And, I mean, there's a huge amount of infrastructure on Fleet Street, too. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, that was the driving factor. For
Right.
so it's an opportunity for bringing more power into the city as
It's-
well.
It's the first street, I believe, that the lines will be buried
Wow.
when they're redoing that. Don't quote me on that, but I know that was
Part of the buried line.
It is part of the buried.
Pretty sure.
The buried lines, and I also believe that
On
There-
Fleet Street?
I think so.
Yeah.
I know that was a heavy part of the conversation, and then also on Market Street Extension when that gets redone, looking at
Those are
trying
going to
to
be buried.
looking at burying those. And I know that obviously there's no policy input, but there's been a lot of conversation with trying to push developers as they redo things to bury lines.
Didn't they do it at McNabb's?
Yep,
Yeah,
they did it at the boat. The boat. They buried.
McNabb paid for that.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. The developer paid for that.
But how come he still has two big poles in front of the building then?
Well, I think they're going to go away
Not an
ultimately.
engineer. So, yeah, but they buried most of the conduit, and so I know that is.
Yeah, they have
that's a
an
conversation.
underground transformer there, too, which is, Eversource hates, but they
Yes,
got
I
him to
need
do
to-
it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Counselor. Thanks, Assistant Mayor. So we've got Ben next on our agenda.
Yeah, I'll 30 seconds or less here. We've had some really great success with public relations lately. Portsmouth is featured on USA Today as the second best travel destination for holidays. Also, a TripAdvisor had a big article. So we also have several media in town this coming weekend. I wish the the rain was going to be snow, so it looked a little cuter for the holidays, but regardless, we'll get some good media out of that. We've been ramping up our educational opportunities for our membership in the community, and we've had several of those recently. I mentioned Restaurant Week happened. We gather the data from the restaurants. We ask them to compare their 10-day prior and their 10-day post to the 10 days of Restaurant Week. And it's pretty consistently a 50% bump during Restaurant Week, so that's significant for a restaurant, just the number of tickets. Granted, those tickets might be slightly lower price point, but it's a really great thing. We also are engaging in a strategic planning process, so that's kind of interesting timing. We'll be going through a similar process at the Chamber, and starting that in January and wrapping that up by hopefully July. And then lastly, I'll just mention is our Public Policy Committee that does our advocacy work and kind of monitors legislation. One of the goals of that committee is to provide opportunities for the business community to connect with our elected officials, both on a local, state, and to as much as we can at a federal level. So we will be hosting an elected officials reception. We haven't done that in many years. So that'll be January 30th. It's a Monday evening, a non-city council Monday evening. And that'll be at the press room at the end of the workday. So you'll all receive invitations to that. And really, we just want to have great dialogue between the business community and our local and state elected officials. So hopefully you can join us for that. And that's all I'll share.
Great. Thanks, Ben. So, as suspected, we've got a pretty compressed time frame for the rest of our meeting. I do want to get to public comment, but I think it feels like there's enough meat to what we talked about today to have a dedicated session, I would say as soon as possible. I think we've got our regular January meeting on the calendar for, we haven't circulated anything yet, but is that
So
6th or 7th?
The 6th is the first Friday. I didn't know if we wanted to look at that.
Yeah.
That's,
Actually,
Monday's a
are we going to
holiday.
meet on the first Friday of every month again next year?
That would be my default, but certainly open to.
Which is fine with me, but
Yeah.
we just hadn't decided. Last year, we handed out a yearly schedule in advance or something, so I just didn't know whether there was.
Yeah, I think that will be the plan. We'll have something mapped out for the full calendar year at our next meeting. I think we will plan to meet on the 6th unless there's any objections, and then we'll plan on the first Friday, and we'll take a look at where Fridays fall with holidays and calendar. Bigger picture, I think it would be helpful to have maybe, we've done a retreat in the past. I think we did, the last one we had in person was at the Levinson Room in the library, and we had it facilitated. I think it feels like it's been long enough and the world has changed enough that it would be beneficial to kind of follow a similar format if there's an appetite and a willingness to do that, maybe outside of our first Friday meeting, so we can look at calendars when we get together the first of the month, and Alan and Sean and I can put our heads together on how we want to approach that, but I think we don't want too much more time to go by with all going on, potentially for us to weigh in on in the next year. And then that way we could still kind of keep our ordinary business. And I wanted to put it to this group how the past year has gone. I think we've gone on some field trips. We've continued to have kind of our periodic report outs from the Chamber, from Colliers, and from other city staff members, planning board, et cetera. I think my default, again, would be to kind of stick to that. And then, but curious on feedback from everyone here.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan, and I think, in previous years, we've adjusted as we've gone along. If something comes up, then we decide how to approach it. And I think, if we can do a retreat, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I forget, did we do a half day last time at the Levinson Room?
Yeah, it was a couple hours. It certainly wasn't a full day.
No, but it was certainly 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I thought that was good. And then COVID hit and screwed everything up. Right. After we had gotten everything perfect.
Under your leadership, it couldn't have been less.
I blame COVID.
Well, the question is whether we need a facilitator for that or not.
I think it's helpful.
It is helpful if the person knows enough about what we're doing
Yeah.
in advance, so it doesn't become a formulaic, how do we build a team together type of, I think most of us have now been on this for a couple of years anyways, right? So I think in most cases facilitators are good, particularly if you get enough, like a full-day retreat. But I think if we're only going to get together for 3 hours, then if we do our own advanced planning a little bit, one of us can almost be the facilitator.
Okay.
Just a thought, unless,
I nominate Commissioner Watson to be the facilitator.
the whole concept of Commissioner Watson seems a little strange to me.
No, I agree. I think if we only have 3 hours, it's really not the time for idea generation. It's the time for idea refinement. So we need some sort of pre-work in order to make. If we're hoping to exit that retreat with a strategy, we need pre-work.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's, are folks most comfortable with a 3-hour engagement? I think a full day would be great, but I don't know how realistic that is for this group, and I think I wouldn't want to wait to try to get perfection for more if there's a willingness to dedicate a morning or an afternoon in January, later in the month, so we can do maybe a little bit more pre-work, and I would ask everyone to come to the January meeting with some thoughts. I think we have some common themes we've been grappling with for the last couple of years that are obvious, but I think advocacy is a huge one. We all want to be more impactful, and I think there's likely to be a lot coming before the council over the next 12 months that it would be good for us to be ready to react and respond and be proactive on stuff coming through.
I agree.
Perhaps we could circulate a straw man for the commission to review and edit.
Sounds good. Okay. Okay.
I guess I would say that as much as I think Tom would do a good job, I think that if he's facilitating, we lose his input.
That was strategic, Vince.
Oh, okay.
you obviously haven't been on this long enough. That's what you got.
Well, I think we'll come with a couple of date options. We'll think through that, put some pre-work in from a leadership perspective, and ask for other input beyond that. We'll get something out before the January meeting and welcome any additional topics or themes we want to make sure we're covering. That'll be exciting. Okay. I did have one other question that I had on my list that I neglected to ask in the council update section. And I know at our last meeting, the city manager had mentioned that McIntyre might be coming before the council in
Tonight.
December.
Or, I mean, Monday.
Monday. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. So it's in the packet.
It's a non-public
Okay.
right now.
When does it go public? Is it first meeting, second meeting in December, or?
Yeah.
The second meeting is December 14th, is the second council meeting in December.
And this is to get an application in to the National Park
Yeah.
Service?
Yeah.
Are you getting a budget? Are you going to find out what it costs?
I don't know.
Okay.
Hopefully we will before it gets built.
But Karen indicated that happened a week ago, and that's not confidential, but the number's confidential. So
Yeah, so I think something
that answers in.
Yeah. What is it?
That's the confidential part.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you find that out.
Tune in Monday night.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, but again, another topic that I think we've kind of been on the
That's
periphery of.
something that
We'll-
EDC should weigh in on. Should the city pay or subsidize a project or not? I'm sure that'll come before us.
Well, it may come before us, but if there's action needed before, yeah, I think we'll probably running short on time to have a meaningful conversation on this.
It could last another hour.
But
The citizens
but
would-
it sounds like the city council has to vote on this month, right?
I presume so. Again, we're going to learn a lot on Monday night, I think. I don't know what we're going to learn either, so.
And we won't learn until,
Right.
right, when it actually comes.
Well, presumably, either the council will approve whatever the proposal's going to be in mid-December, and then it has to be submitted to Park Service by the end of the month. So it will be a fait accompli by the time we meet again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You don't know anything anyways.
Okay. Well, then I guess jump to public comment.
Just a couple of minor things. You were talking about Everett businesses coming in from Massachusetts. It might be interesting to have Michael Bergeron from the Department of BEA, Business and Economic Affairs, come and speak. He's the out-of-state recruiter. And he knows, he's got his pulse on the thing. I will tell you that, and Bob and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's exactly 0 square feet of industrial space available in Portsmouth right now. That's readily available. So you can woo them, but where do they go? We have no land, so they go elsewhere. So that, he might, but he's a very interesting, he's got his pulse on who they're talking to. He could respond to that question about the millionaires. What I heard about that is more that the CEOs are looking to buy property up here
Right,
to
move here.
establish their residence, not the companies moving. It's very difficult to move a company and move people out of Massachusetts up here. There's a company, just as an anecdote to that, 111 Ledge Road is an industrial building in Seabrook. A company in, I want to say Georgetown, Newbury, something like that, called Munters, which makes dehumidification equipment, moved there, but it was not a move, it was an expansion. Okay, so that's what we're seeing, a lot of expansion. But we have no industrial space, so it's irrelevant. The other question, the other thing I just want to mention, when I saw that comment about making State Street two-way, I did sort of an informal survey of friends and businesses I know, and not many people are in favor of it for a lot of reasons, but I'm sure it'll be looked at very carefully, so. And the other thing, in regards to that, don't forget, there was millions of dollars spent on improving State Street. When it's going two ways, would any of that be impacted if it was going one way, if it would go two ways? No. Just.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Okay. Lots covered, thank you. Anything further, other business anyone wants to touch upon before we entertain a motion to adjourn? Okay, so next meeting, Friday, January 6th, 7:30 a.m. Forward to it.
Move we adjourn.
Thanks, Tom. Second. All in favor? Aye. Great.